Ever since John Rave changed his number, he's been a completely different hitter. Is it too small of a sample size, or is this production here to stay? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us wherever you listen to podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. Now, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We'll be giving our picks a little bit later on in today's show. But right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So get started today over at FanDuel. A little reminder that because we did not have an episode yesterday, I plan on getting you 2 episodes, including this one, for today. So this one will come out, of course, a little bit before Game 2 between the Royals and the Cubs. And then I plan on getting another one out tonight, recapping what happened in the game. You can also count on the Royals postcast. No, we didn't have one up last night, but Chance will be back in action, ready to go at the conclusion, again, of Game 2 between the Royals and the Cubs. And it really is fitting that we are going to be doing 2 episodes today because there's a lot to go over. The Royals had their draft picks signed, or at least a chunk of them. No surprise whatsoever that Cameron Millar went way over slot. We talked about that in terms of what the guys, the first 4 picks were going to make. They got both of their first-round selections locked up, and Sean Gamble and Josh Hammond. They also were able to get Lombardi locked up. And then, of course, Cameron Millar, the big one there, the prep arm out of Arizona. They had to go a little bit over slot to get that done. So I know some people wanted me to talk about that. The Royals are doing a good job of locking up the guys that may have been on the fence, but for the most part, they knew the guys they were taking in the first 5 rounds. They were not going to have any issues in signing. Last night, though, the Royals dominate the Chicago Cubs 12-4. Came as pretty big surprise, I would say. This was a series that just was not favorable on paper whatsoever. The Cubs had one of the best records in all of baseball. Yes, you were throwing Noah Cameron, but the Royals were coming off a series loss in Miami. You got a packed Wrigley Field. You got a series where you're going to be starting Rich Hill on Tuesday, which, of course, would be tonight. It was an important Game 1 because if the Royals would have gotten bombed in Game 1, I don't know how you're feeling going into Game 2 with Rich Hill. Who knows how much he's going to work into this game tonight. But to turn to Rich Hill to try to even up the series, not really a good formula there. But unfortunately, the Royals don't really have anybody else to turn to. In this game, though, the Royals fall behind 4-1, as we all know, and they respond with 11 unanswered runs. Salvador Perez, who right now is the hottest hitter on the Royals, he has a multi-home run game. Jack Caglione went the other way with a solo shot. And we will talk about them, hopefully, throughout this week, because I do want to have one of our episodes dedicated to Salvador Perez and what we are seeing in his age 35 season. But I'm going to talk about the third guy to homer in this game, and that's John Rave. And in this second half, or these final 65 games, whatever you want to call it, he started in 3 of them. He did come in on, I want to say it was Sunday, for defensive replacement reasoning, so he didn't get an at-bat in that game. But he's homered 3 times in these 3 games that he's played in. Now, one of them, it was the multi-home run game, the 3-run homer off of Sandy Alcantara. Then he has the game-tying home run off of Foucher in the 9th. And then last night against, I want to say that was Chris Flexen and not Ben Brown that was still out there. Flexen's had a phenomenal year. But John Rave didn't get a cheapie. I mean, he knew it off the bat. And it's a really cool moment. John Morosi interviewed him after the game. His dad grew up a lifelong Cubs fan, so to do that at Wrigley Field, that's what's special about baseball, right? But also what's special about baseball is guys like John Rave sticking it out, continuing to grind and getting an opportunity at the major league level. I'm not going to excuse, stuff that I've even said on the podcast because I had my questions as to why John Rave was still getting every day at bats. He was hitting under 170. He wasn't hitting for much power. Yeah, he was playing a fine right field, but you needed a legitimate bat there. And no, there wasn't really an answer in AAA anymore. They had given everybody those opportunities, it felt like, But John Rave was not on my list of you continue to give him at bats. That was until the beginning here of the second half where we've seen more power. And to me, it's not so much about, well, there's these home runs here, because we've seen in baseball, even the unlikeliest players run into a home run. We can all remember when Nicky Lopez had his first big league home run in his old college ballpark when the Royals and Tigers, I want to say it was, played in Omaha, and he homered into the right center field bleachers. He was somebody you just never counted on hitting a home run. And for a long time, John Rave was that guy. If he ran into one, probably a short porch, wind might be gusting, he would get incredibly lucky. But he made some tweaks during the All-Star break to his swing, and he's seen immediate results. And that can be something to keep an eye on. Because again, John Rave has 78 major league at-bats. It's not enough to really say he's doing great or he's doing poorly. If you just saw the 205 batting average, you'd say, well, he's not playing that well. And I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment and completely buy into a 7-game sample size. But even Alex Duvall, who still does great Royals work on Twitter, bringing up some of those advanced stats that going back to the end of June, he's been around a league average bat. And how often have we brought that up? Just find somebody who can be a league average bat. And last night's performance, and really these last 3 to 4 games for him, and I'll even throw in the first half finale, that Sunday game against the Mets where he had the 2-run double. There are guys still on this team that I want to see what they have. And John Rave, again, he's still not at the top of that list. It's why you've heard me say before, Jack Caglione needs to play through these struggles because there's nobody else in right field I really want to see take at bats. Nick Lofton is kind of creeping back into that conversation, mainly because he's played a lot better over the last couple of weeks. If you just were to take out the All-Star break and throughout that week, the last couple of weeks of actual play. And now John Rave is on that list as well. And the interesting part to this is that we are approaching the trade deadline. And John Rave's not going anywhere. Nick Lofton's not going anywhere. Jack Caglione's not going anywhere. So you can expect those guys to be on the roster to close out the rest of the season. Now, what does pop up in my mind is, what if the Royals did look into trading Kyle Isbell? Kyle Isbell's had one of his better years. Now, he's not anything exceptional offensively, but he's been a very good defender, and he's hitting around 255 to 260. A lot of teams out there need outfield depth. They need a fourth outfielder. And I believe the Royals could get something in return, whether it be a reliever, AAA starter, and it would open up more spots in the outfield. So this is kind of a domino effect here, right? If you trade Kyle Isbell, well, how does the outfield look? You still got Caglione and right. You might be acquiring an outfielder. That's been the constant buzz, is that the Royals are looking for outfield help, looking to add a bat, and whether they're buying or selling feels pretty likely. They're going to bring in somebody that's going to be starting over there in left field. So center field would then open up, right? Could John Rave be that guy? He's actually been a decent defender. Now, can he handle center field? He's done it in late inning defensive switches before. He's not been a starter out there before. He's been right field and left field for the most part. But I wonder if that's something the Royals could contemplate a little bit, because Kyle Isbell still has another year or two of control, but you kind of know what Kyle Isbell is. And he's only a year older than John Rave, so it's not like John Rave's the obvious answer. And we can't sit here and say, well, John Rave is now the answer because he's looked really good in 4 games. But if you go out there and acquire another bat, and that bat will likely play left field, if you still have Kyle Isbell on the team, John Rave and Nick Lofton move to bench roles. And maybe that's what they're going to be when it's all said and done. I am curious, though, if what John Rave is doing is sustainable. I'm not expecting him to homer, 3 out of 4 games or 3 times in 4 games. I'm not expecting that. But there are some intriguing numbers to make you wonder if John Rave could be an answer in the outfield. They've had 4 years of Kyle Isbell, and Kyle Isbell's pretty much given them the same production every single year. And there is value in that, which is why I'm sure he's got some trade interest. He plays good defense. He's going to hit what he hits. You're not going to get too high or too low. The Royals don't have no outfield depth, which is why they'd want to be bringing in a bat as well. John Rave is someone you kind of need to know what you want to do with. Now, is he just going to be a bench player? Okay, maybe he is just that. He plays 1 out of every 3 games. Maybe Nick Lofton's the exact same thing. I just see this platoon situation between them, but they're going to need a position to play. If Kyle Isbell is still on the roster and you trade for a left fielder, well, they're not taking at bats from Caglione. Kyle Isbell's defense is too valuable to just leave on the bench all the time, and then you'd have a brand new left fielder out there. DH is something that would make some sense there because they don't really have a definitive DH. It's usually a revolving door. The Royals also like to have that flexibility, right, where they can move guys throughout the season into that DH role and have maybe a different DH every single night of a series. They've done that before. They're going to continue to do that. And if you acquire someone who's a DH only, it kind of defeats that purpose there. So I've been very pleased what I've seen from John Rave. He's in the lineup again tonight. Not trying to fall in love with the 4-game sample size or a 7-game sample size, but the trade deadline is coming up. And with the way that he's playing, I want to keep seeing him play like that until he just can't anymore. And if you can identify that, then all right, you have your answer. I just want to see more at bats until maybe we can decide whether this is just a very lucky and fortunate 4 to 5 game stretch or if this can be a sign of things to come. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I've got an idea of what the Royals could potentially do when they're talking about buying and selling. I'll let you know what I think next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Want to tell you about our title sponsor in FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. And for my pick, I'm going to go for a couple of the later games on tonight. I don't really feel comfortable in picking something between the Royals and the Cubs. So I will go to the Tuesday night late night caps here with the Dodgers and the Twins. I'm going to take the over on innings for Yamamoto, and I'm also going to take the over on strikeouts for Mizorowski in his start against the Seattle Mariners. We know that we are getting closer and closer to when the Royals are going to need to be making moves, whether it be buying or selling or a little bit of both. We're going to know by next Wednesday, wouldn't it be? Actually, next Thursday. Next Thursday, the Royals will be off. They will have just wrapped up their series against Atlanta, and they're going to have until the deadline to make as many moves or as little moves as possible. And so often in ESPN articles, athletic articles, we have seen the Royals be brought up in that they just have not picked one way or another what they want to do. And reading my comments, mostly every single day, I don't always get to them, but when I get the notification, I like to hear what you guys are saying. And we've got a group of people that want them to buy. You know, they feel that they are close enough, and you get a few other bats in here, pair them with an offense that is playing better of late, and you get some help for the rotation. You get healthier in that department, and this team can play 15 games over 500 in the second half. Then you've got the side that is completely out on this team. What they have shown us is who they are. This is who they are going to be, and they should sell and try to get value and play for next year. The good thing is, I feel that everybody's on the same page with they need to try and compete next year. This is not something where you tear it all down and you're looking to like 2028. If the Royals don't make the playoffs this year, that does not deter them in what they want to do for next year. It does, however, change how you approach the deadline. And I've heard people say, well, they need to trade Jonathan India. They need to trade Carlos Estevez. And they need to trade Chris Bubich. Get as much value for these guys while they can. And yes, if they are blown away by a deal, then they should make that deal. I'm just not sold they're going to be blown away with deals involving some of those guys. Like Carlos Estevez, I don't see them being blown away by a deal. And you don't just trade him to trade him. He has not been great of late. He's also a closer with a sub-3 ERA and 26 saves and 31 opportunities. that's still a good number. And maybe it's not good next year, but that's something where you feel we are going to really have to be blown away to make a deal like that. Chris Bubich, they absolutely have to be floored to make a deal like that. The only name, as you are all very familiar with, that can get them a good return and is likely to be traded, or is, probably leaning toward likely to be traded, would be Seth Lugo, right? I don't see them trading John Schreiber and getting a huge return, or trading Michael Lorenzen because he's been banged up, of course, and he hasn't had the best of numbers. You're not getting a return or a huge haul for him. And that's just the unfortunate timing of getting hurt right around the deadline. But even if he was healthy, I'm not sure he generates a huge amount of interest where you want to just make that deal because he's on a rental, or he's a one-year guy on a rental year. Seth Lugo, though, is somebody that's constantly been brought up in trade talks. The Cubs are one of those teams that have checked in on Seth Lugo, and all the time I hear, well, Owen Casey or Kevin Alcantara. And yes, those names would be great to get, even just one of them for Seth Lugo. But John Morosi, who was covering the game last night at Wrigley Field, reported that the Cubs are not going to trade Owen Casey for a rental starter unless there's more players involved in that deal. They would much rather go after a starter with years of control, i.e. Joe Ryan, i.e. Mitch Keller. And so if you're the Royals, I firmly believe you should not be shutting off trade talks if the Cubs say our number one prospect and number 3 prospect are our top 3, because I know they've got the young catcher as well. It's number 2, I believe, in their system. They're off the table. If we're talking about Seth Lugo, they're off the table. And don't try to, Hunter Harvey being thrown in this deal or Steven Cruz, that probably is not going to be enough to get that done. And I'd imagine if the Royals are going to be trading Seth Lugo, they want to get an arm in return, because Cole Reagan is still on the IL, Michael Lorenzen's on the IL, and then you'd be trading away, production-wise, your best starter this year. You'd have Chris Bubich, Noah Cameron, and Michael Wacha in your rotation, and oh, by the way, Rich Hill, who we'll talk about here in the final segment. So in this buying and selling talk, because we've heard this, well, the Royals want to buy a little bit, but they also may be open to selling. Here's the way I would try to approach it. Who's to say that you can't go to the team like the Cubs? We'll use them for this hypothetical. You go to a team like the Cubs. I brought up the name Christian Franklin. It got some pushback on Twitter, but that's natural, because anytime I bring up a guy, it gets some pushback because not everybody's going to be on the same page. But Christian Franklin, local guy, grew up in Overland Park, played college ball at Arkansas, and he's got an OBP of 391 in AAA this year. Walk rate above 15%. Doesn't strike out a lot. Speed guy, plays all 3 outfield spots. I believe there'd be some interest there. He's also the 25th ranked prospect in the system. You've got another name, too, of I believe Long was the last name on him. He's hitting 317 in AAA for Iowa, and he's the 9th ranked prospect in the Cubs system. So you've got some guys that are on the doorstep of the major leagues, and they would be penciled in immediately to your lineup. You could look at them being 23 and 25. Those are guys that have good approaches in AAA, big enough sample size. In their career in the minor leagues, they've put up good numbers. Those would be 2 guys I'd like. If you could not get Alcantara or Casey, and a 35-year-old rental pitcher is just not going to be enough, in my opinion, to get those 2 players, or just one of them. And I believe you also want an arm, as I just said. So if you got someone like Franklin or someone like Long, and you got an arm, good buddy of mine, Josh Kaiser, does great work over at KCSN and does great Royals Twitter content. He brings up the Jack Flaherty trade, where it's kind of similar, where the Tigers got a lottery ticket throw in and they got Trey Sweeney. Like, Seth Lugo can be somewhat comparable to that money-wise, maybe not so much of production, but still, you have a team like the Cubs who, yes, need pitching, but they're not going to mortgage away their future for 10 to 15 starts of 35-year-old Seth Lugo. Right? And even last year, we saw with Seth Lugo in the second half, he didn't pitch as well. He was not the same guy that he was in the first half. So it's not as simple as we're just not going to listen at all if you were going after, the number 1 prospect. There are some moving parts to this, and maybe the Royals would have to include more players, but I don't see them trading Lugo and Estevez just for Owen Casey. As much as some people would like that, I don't see them going that route, because then you still have 2 arms that you need to replace there, and a number 2 starter, and then your closer you're going to need to find a way to replace. Not saying it can't be done. It's just harder to do. So in this buying and selling conversation, as I said, maybe you go trade for guys like that. You get a young AAA bat just blocked right now in Chicago. If it's not Owen Casey or not Alcantara, you get that guy up to the big leagues. You like the numbers. You like the overall makeup and the model, and he's one of the guys you get. And you get another starter who you might have to mold a little bit. There were 3 names, too, that I remember Josh brought up that I think could make a lot of sense. They have not put it together at the big league level yet, but they're between 23 and 25, and they're blocked right now. So he brings up, I'm trying to remember which names it was. Maybe I don't have it in front of me. But there were 3 guys that would make some sense there. Ben Brown was one of them I know who pitched against the Royals last night. And the numbers don't look good. I also trust the Royals pitching development and going after some of those guys. So it was Ben Brown and 2 other names. Unfortunately, I don't have right in front of me. That's on me. But if you made a move like that, you get some young talent, guys with years of control, and that's a part of your selling because you are selling Seth Lugo. Then you go into the buy conversation. Who's to say then you can't trade a prospect or 2 to go get one of your outfielders of the future or another bat to help you right now and next year, maybe even the year after that. That's what I could see with the buying and selling is you could sell Seth Lugo and get guys that are ready now, help your team now and the future. And you could trade away a prospect or 2 to try to bring in another arm or another bat. That's what I'm kind of gathering when discussing this. Because I know a lot of people have been confused by, well, how can you do a little bit of both and be serious about contending, but then also being serious about where you're truly at? Because I totally get it. I've been confused by it a handful of times, but I kind of believe that what they're saying is we could get a deal that we like for Seth Lugo, and technically that is defined as selling because you are selling somebody you may not expect to get back next year, and then you could still trade some of your prospects to get major league help right now, to give your team a chance in the second half, but also to build your team for 2026. Just things to think about there. We've got 10 days to come up with hypotheticals, to come up with thoughts, but I could see a world in which that happens. There's also a world in which they don't like a single deal that is brought to them, and they hang on to Seth Lugo and try to give him an extension before the qualifying offer has to be accepted or declined. So what do you think? Let us know in the YouTube comments below, and you can always let me know on Twitter. For our final segment, let's preview a historic night at Wrigley Field, which is going to be underway in about 2 hours from when I'm recording this. Rich Hill, 45-year-old Rich Hill, will become the oldest player to ever play for the Royals, and he will start in the same place he made his Major League debut 20 years ago, right there at Wrigley Field. We'll dive into it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find us on wherever you listen to your podcast. Want to tell you about OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a burst pipe. Even if the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? Nope, you just called the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important, and that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone is offering Locked On Royals listeners 20% off for their first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That is OpenPhone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Dick Mountain is going to be on the bump tonight, taking on his former team in the Chicago Cubs, and this will now be his 14th big league team that he's pitched for. Quite a journey. If you're like me, around my age, you would know that Rich Hill has been a part of your life forever. You've never really known a world in which he wasn't pitching or you heard about him. You know, if you were 5 or 6 or 7, maybe when you started watching baseball, maybe 4 years old, you would maybe know the name Rich Hill. You certainly would have known him by 2010, and he was always bouncing around. He had the great nickname Dick Mountain. And the Royals, truthfully, were left with no choice on who they were going to start. I think they were waiting to see how the game went last night before making their definitive decision and who was going to start. But I did see some people upset by it. You know, how embarrassing is it that the Royals are starting a 45-year-old pitcher when they're 4.5 games back of a wild card? It's what we've talked about now for the last couple of weeks. there's not really any AAA depth. It's why they signed Rich Hill in the first place. It's why they signed Dallas Keuchel. It's why they brought in John Gant. There are guys in Omaha that are just journeymen, and they're trying to catch on somewhere. Thomas Hatch, from spring training, a minor league deal guy. He's been in the rotation as well. And Rich Hill, though it's not just for show. It's not just to look like a circus. He's still trying to stick around at the major league level and give this thing a shot. And it's a tough challenge he's going to have tonight and taking on a lineup like the Cubs. I don't expect him to work deep into the game. He threw 2 innings over the weekend. So my guess is this is still technically a bullpen game for the Royals. I would be floored, even if he was pitching well, went 9 up and 9 down, if he saw the lineup a second time through. I'm guessing that Rich Hill is going to get the start, hopefully throw 2 innings, and then you can turn things over to Jonathan Bolin. You can turn things over to Angel Serpa. The bullpen's pretty fresh. I mean, they got 2 innings out of Andrew Hoffman, who they demoted. They also took Tyler Gentry off the 40-man roster to make room for Rich Hill. But their hands were tied a little bit. And I understand it's going to make some people upset if he doesn't pitch well tonight. But there just was not another starter they could call upon. I don't believe Dallas Keuchel's ready. He's not stretched out enough. They could go to John Gant or Thomas Hatch. I believe it's kind of a wash. Rich Hill, though he is 45, he can really spin it, might give them a funky angle and velocity they haven't seen in a while from the left side. But just from a baseball standpoint, me being, yes, number one, a Royals fan, but B, a baseball fan in general, I believe this is really cool. A guy that made his major league debut 20 years ago in the same spot he's starting 20 years later, I feel that's pretty cool. And no matter what happens tonight, I tip my cap to him. To be 45 and pitching your way through Omaha, he had the ability to opt out about a month ago. He decided to stick with it, and he may only get 1 start. I mean, the Royals have not seemed overly concerned with Michael Lorenzen. They view him as missing only 1 to 2 starts with that oblique strain. It could always be worse. They've also got the trade deadline coming up. And as we just talked about, there could be another arm that they're bringing in, somebody to bolster the rotation, give them some extra length, give them some extra depth. This is not going to be a permanent solution for the Royals. This is a situation in which they have just been beaten up with injuries in the rotation. They've had Seth Lugo on the IL before. They've had Cole Reagans on the IL before. They've had Michael Lorenzen on the IL before. Chris Bubich, Micah Wacha, Noah Cameron, they've had a clean bill of health this year, unless I'm missing some start they missed or they were on the IL for a quick stint. There is nobody in that Omaha rotation or in the bullpen that's stretched out enough to come up here and start. Now, maybe they could go with a different plan here. I said you let him face the lineup 1 time through, but they also could have just gone with a bullpen game if they were going to throw Rich Hill for just 2 innings. I'm only expecting him to go a few. I'm going to cap it off at 2 innings, maybe 1 run or less. That would be a huge win for the Royals, and then you turn it over to the bullpen. Who knows, though? If the Royals put up a 6 spot in the first couple of innings, you might try to squeeze 3 or 4 out of it, and then you go to the bullpen. So this will be a cool deal. I'm really hoping he doesn't get lit up here in the first inning. I can't say I'd be shocked if it happened. Again, this is a guy who had a 5+ ERA in AAA. The other guys just weren't picks to start in this game. I wouldn't get too comfortable with it, though. If you're really irritated and agitated that he's getting the start, my guess is that Michael Lorenzen will be making his start against, I want to say that'd be Atlanta, right? Atlanta next week, early on next week, or they will have made a move to get somebody to start. If Rich Hill makes 2 starts, then okay, I'll cap it at 2, and I will say that that's all that he's going to be getting. But that'll be the matchup tonight. Rich Hill will take the mound against Matthew Boyd. I thought this was interesting, too. I put this out there on Twitter last night, that Matthew Boyd's no spring chicken either. He's 34 years old, and he was a freshman in high school when Rich Hill made his debut. Like, you're talking about a guy in his mid-30s who had just begun high school when Rich Hill was at Wrigley Field pitching for the Cubs, making his debut. I also thought this was pretty funny just to show how long it has been. But Rich Hill made his debut on June 15th of 2005. That same day at Kauffman Stadium, the Royals beat the Dodgers 3-1. And get some of these names. You had Jose Lima pitching for the Royals. He picked up his first win of the year with 8 innings of 1-run ball. You had Angel Baroa at short. You had Emil Brown in right. You had Shane Costa in left. There were some regulars that we can all remember. John Buck, too. I'm not saying those guys weren't. We all remember all of those names that were brought up. But yeah, 2005 for the Royals, 3 managers that year, 106 losses. But they did beat the Dodgers, who were starting Brad Penny in that game. That was when Rich Hill first got a taste of big league action, and he's going to get it again 20 years later, pitching at Wrigley Field again, this time for his 14th club, the Kansas City Royals. Rich Hill, Matthew Boyd, 7:05 first pitch in Chicago. That'll do it for our first episode today of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen a day. For your second, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Enjoy the game. Hopefully enjoy the Rich Hill start, and we'll be talking to you after the game for our second episode of the day. But until a little bit later on, you take it easy, Kansas City.